So Karl Popper, in The Open Society and Its Enemies, which is probably his best-known work, talks about how when you have a proponent of the open society, what you tend to see is their ideas only get popularized after a proponent of the authoritarian society has taken their ideas and turned them around to defend the status quo or to defend the ideas of authoritarian societies. And it's interesting because this has kind of happened to Karl Popper himself with the paradox of tolerance. And so this book is about 500 pages, 600 pages. So yeah, this book is about 500 pages of regular book and then another over 200 pages of footnotes. And one of those footnotes, which is, I think it's a long paragraph, but still one paragraph, is on the paradox of tolerance. And I reread it before this to double check to make sure that it was saying what I thought it was saying. Because basically what he is saying in here is he is saying that the open society needs to be intolerant of intolerance of the open society itself, in the form of, if you have people who are trying to use violence to overthrow the open society or shut down free debate in the open society needs to make that illegal, needs to stop them from doing that. But pretty much the only context I've ever heard the paradox of tolerance, and also the vast majority of the time I've ever heard of Popper before I read this book myself, was people saying that the paradox of tolerance meant one of two things. And so either it meant you should be using vigilante violence to shut down people who are intolerant, or you should be having laws against people being intolerant. And in both cases, what they mean is tolerance as an end state, tolerance of other people, and it can extend to things like just not wanting more immigrants. That is the kind of intolerance these people want to shut down. So that is an end state. That is not the kind of tolerance Popper was talking about. Popper was talking about the tolerance of process, of listening to different views, even those you disagree with, ones you find very offensive, without resorting to violence to try to shut them down. And both of these things, either vigilante violence or using the state to shut down views that are intolerant as an end state, will destroy the open society in the long term. And this is an example of Nassim Taleb, who I've talked about, author of Antifragile and Skin in the Game. He talked about it in both these books, I think, is this idea that people in power tend to like to make things feel smoother. So small discomfort, small hiccups, small inconveniences, they try to shut those down. And those are often part of self-correcting feedback loops, and shutting them down leads to larger catastrophes later on. And so basically, the people who are talking about Popper's paradox of tolerance are pretty much always taking exactly the opposite of what he says. And the people who are like, we should use vigilante violence especially, these people are not out there actually beating up on people they disagree with mostly. They're saying you should, which is the exact same thing that the Social Democrats did in Europe, especially Germany, in the 1920s, 1930s, that Popper says was the worst of both worlds because it was ineffective at stopping their opponents, but it was really effective at driving people who were on the fence into the arms of their opponents because they would act, but they weren't doing a lot of threatening violence to, like, everyone. The other version of we need to ban it with the government is more subtly wrong, but it's still, both of these are focused on tolerance as an end state. Tolerance is something that the open society produces, but the natural state of people is to be pretty intolerant. And the open society makes people a lot more tolerant, but you can't force people to be more tolerant by shutting down their views. What you can do is keep the open society healthy by allowing free debate of ideas, as long as people are not trying to use violence to shut down other people's ideas. And so anyways, so this is, I'm going to talk about some other examples of this too, but this was interesting because it was Popper who identified this phenomenon of this happening, and it's happened to Popper himself. Anyways, I'm Magpie, this is Leela. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.